The moment I walked down that aisle, I never imagined my life would be shattered in front of everyone I loved. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. The church was bathed in soft golden light. The faint hum of the organ floated through the air, and every pair of eyes was fixed on the bride. Madison's hands trembled inside her lace gloves, her heartbeat hammering like a drum in her chest. This was supposed to be her happiest day, the day she said, "I do," to a love she had dreamed of since childhood. Yet, there was an uneasy whisper inside her, a quiet warning she couldn't ignore. She told herself it was just nerves, the kind every bride felt before stepping into a lifetime promise. But when she reached the altar, looking into Ethan's eyes for the first time that day, something shifted. That familiar warmth she once felt turned icy. Her stomach twisted and a sinking dread settled in her chest. Madison had grown up in a small town, raised by her mother, who juggled 2 jobs to give her the life she never had. She had always believed in love, in respect, in building a family where kindness came first. Meeting Ethan felt like a fairy tale. He was confident, successful, and charming, the kind of man who could sweep anyone off their feet. Madison had thought her patience and loyalty had finally been rewarded. But love, as she had learned too late, can sometimes wear a mask. Over time, Ethan's charm had started to show cracks. He laughed at her ambitions, told her teaching was beneath someone with her potential, and made little jabs about her upbringing in front of friends. At first, Madison had brushed it off. She convinced herself that his teasing was harmless, that it was just his way of showing affection. Deep down, though, each insult cut a little deeper than she allowed herself to feel. And now, standing at the altar, every past slight returned to her like a punch she had ignored for too long. The pastor began speaking, his voice gentle, solemn. But before he could finish, Ethan interrupted. The smirk on his face froze the room in disbelief. "Can you believe she actually thinks she's worthy of me? Look at her, this dress, this whole ceremony. It's cute, I guess, but honestly, marrying her feels like I'm settling." Gasps echoed through the church. Madison felt her cheeks ignite with shame. Her mother clutched her chest, horrified. Friends lowered their eyes, unable to meet the bride's gaze. Every whisper, every shiver of judgment pressed down on her. It was the kind of humiliation that could crush someone entirely. For a moment, Madison wanted to run, to disappear from the world entirely. But then something inside her shifted. The years of silent compromise, the moments she had silenced herself for his approval flashed before her eyes. She remembered every time she let him diminish her, every time she believed she wasn't enough. And then, for the very first time, she chose herself. Slowly, deliberately, Madison lifted her head, her tears held back by sheer determination. The guests leaned forward, expecting her to break, to apologize, to beg for mercy. But Madison had a different plan. She inhaled, letting her voice carry through the heavy air of the church. "Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you for witnessing not a wedding, but a moment of awakening." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Ethan blinked, clearly not expecting this turn. "For years, I believed love meant tolerating cruelty. I thought respect was optional if someone claimed to care. But today, I've realized that my worth is not defined by anyone else." All eyes turned to Ethan. Madison's gaze was firm, unwavering. "You may think I am beneath you," she said softly, almost serene. "But standing here, I am taller than I ever have been. Because marrying you would not lift me up. It would bury me." The church fell silent again, but this time it was awe, not shock. Madison lifted her veil, letting it drop to the floor like a symbolic shedding of fear, shame, and everything that had held her captive. She began walking down the aisle. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing louder than the last. This was no retreat, it was defiance. Guests watched, some in stunned silence, others with admiration. A few even clapped quietly, unable to contain respect for her courage. By the time she reached the church doors, sunlight spilled across her face, warm and welcoming. Her mother ran to her, tears streaming, but these were tears of pride this time. Madison hugged her tightly, whispering, "I'm free." But freedom, as Madison quickly learned, came with its own challenges. The whispers, the judgments from neighbors, even the lingering sting of betrayal. These were not going to disappear overnight. Yet for the first time, she knew she had the strength to face them. Madison began to rebuild her life. She pursued her dream of teaching, pouring herself into helping children believe in themselves, just as she had finally learned to believe in herself. She volunteered at women's shelters, sharing her story, showing others that walking away from humiliation was not defeat, it was triumph. And slowly, life began to bloom again. Madison laughed more freely, lived more authentically, and started to truly love the woman she saw in the mirror. But what happened next, years later, would bring her face to face with Ethan once more, in a moment that would challenge every lesson she had learned, every step of courage she had taken. Sometimes the past shows up when you least expect it, but it's how you face it that defines your future. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. Years had passed since Madison walked away from that altar. She had transformed her life in ways she never imagined, building a career as a beloved teacher, mentoring countless children, and becoming a voice of strength for women who felt trapped by circumstances or toxic relationships. Every day, she carried herself with confidence, pride, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. Then came the charity gala. Madison had been invited to speak about women's empowerment, sharing her story as a beacon of hope. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, laughter, and the gentle clink of glasses. She moved across the stage with poise, her speech notes in hand, yet her mind wandered briefly to the past. And then she saw him. Ethan. He was seated in the audience, older, his arrogance replaced by a subtle unease she hadn't expected. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she noticed the flicker of something, regret, perhaps, or realization across his features. The memories of humiliation at the altar threatened to rise, but Madison's smile remained calm, composed, almost serene. She had long ago shed the weight of his cruelty. Taking a deep breath, she began her speech. "Respect is not optional in love," she said, her voice ringing clear. "Without it, there is no foundation, no future, no forever." The audience leaned in, captivated not just by her words, but the power in her presence. Madison's journey from humiliation to triumph was now a lesson for everyone listening. "I once believed that love meant enduring disrespect, tolerating cruelty, and shrinking myself to fit someone else's idea of worth. But I learned the hardest way that walking away is not weakness, it's strength. And choosing yourself is the most courageous act of all." Eyes glistened around the room. Some audience members reached for tissues, moved by her vulnerability. Others nodded in silent agreement, understanding the courage it took to reclaim one's life. And then Madison looked directly at Ethan. She didn't need to say a word to him. Her poise, her calm authority, and the genuine light in her eyes said it all. She was no longer the girl he had tried to belittle. She was whole, radiant, and untouchable by his past cruelties. After the gala, as guests mingled, Ethan approached her. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Madison," he began, unsure how to continue. I I never realized. I mean, I'm sorry." Madison listened, a small, polite smile on her lips. She could feel the old anger stirring, but she had learned something vital over the years. Her power didn't come from revenge, it came from freedom. "Ethan," she said calmly, "what happened years ago, that's your lesson, not mine. I've learned mine, and it doesn't include bitterness. It includes strength, self-respect, and choosing life over pain." He nodded slowly, realizing that words alone could never undo the respect she had earned, not from anyone else, but from herself. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of applause and conversations, Madison basking in the joy of having reclaimed her narrative. She spoke to countless women, shared her experiences, and offered guidance to those struggling to find their voice. Each story she touched reminded her that her pain had been transformed into something far greater: inspiration. Weeks later, Madison received a letter. It was from one of the women she had spoken to at the gala, a single mother who had been enduring years of subtle belittlement from her partner. She wrote that Madison's story gave her the courage to leave, to reclaim her own life. Tears streamed down Madison's face as she read the words. That was her true victory. Changing lives, showing others that walking away was not defeat. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. Madison's life continued to flourish. She traveled to teach, met new friends, discovered hobbies she had long abandoned, and found love. Not the shallow, controlling love she had once chased, but genuine connection built on respect, laughter, and mutual support. Every day, she reminded herself of the woman she had been, the pain she had endured, and the courage it took to rise above it. Ethan's memory faded into a lesson rather than a wound. She no longer feared judgment, humiliation, or heartbreak because she had learned the most important truth of all. Her worth was hers alone to define. And though she never returned to that church or that day, she carried its lessons in every step she took forward, each one echoing louder than the last. I am enough, I am strong, I am free. The bride who had once been humiliated at the altar did not end her story in shame. She rewrote it with courage, resilience, and unwavering self-respect. And in doing so, she taught everyone who watched, listened, and heard her story that sometimes the hardest endings are the beginnings we need most. Madison's journey wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a testament to the power of choosing oneself, of refusing to let anyone else define your value, and of turning pain into purpose. Her story reminds us all, no one has the power to define our worth except us. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all.